Thank you very much for joining us. We have several presenters today, so you will see on the next slide the list of who will be speaking, and I will invite them to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Terry Clark. I'm the Director of the Professional Services Division and here to share information with you today.
Great, and I am Cheryl Hickey. I'm another administrator in the Professional Services Division. Happy to be here with you today.
Hello everyone, Amy Rising, Director of Performance Assessment Policy and Development, and we welcome you here on this sunny Friday afternoon.
Hi, this is Gay Roby. I opened it as well, but I would like to also direct your attention to the bottom of the slide where it says, this webinar will be posted on our YouTube channel, including the chat feature. The questions and the answers will be posted as well. We had that question asked many times, so we put it on the footer of our slides for you.
Welcome everybody. Happy Friday. I'm Brittany G, and I'm a manager in certification.
And good afternoon, I'm James Webb. I am a consultant with the Performance Assessment Development and looking forward to presenting information with you and glad that you can join us today.
So we wanted to start with just 5 webinar norms. I'm sure you'll be familiar with most of them. As you have already figured out, your microphone was muted upon your arrival as well as your camera. If later on during the question and answer period, if we open up the mic and your name is called, the moderator will unmute your microphone, which will allow you to speak. Secondly, we do have a chat feature for you to post your questions on, but we really caution you to keep your questions within the phase that we are working on. Our next slide is the agenda, and you will see we have 3 very distinct categories. And if you would please keep those in the middle, the second, third, and fourth bullets. Talk about the commission action, the individual development plan, and then a new document that will be posted today, we're hoping, Terry, that talk about program supports, and that's really where we'll spend most of the time. So going back a slide, please, James. Please keep your questions at a general level of understanding this information. We were talking earlier, this is very dense information, and the more you hear it, the more often you hear it, the more you're going to understand and be able to apply, as well as turn around and tell the other folks in your program. So if you would keep your questions to the general understanding and keep those candidate or program specific inquiries to personal one-on-one correspondence with any of us who are presenting, we would appreciate that. And then number 4, it's always so tempting to answer that one little email that popped up on your screen, but we really ask you to avoid your multitasking throughout the webinar's presentation because it's very important that you hear all this information. And then finally, all things in moderation. Would you please honor the time of the participants and the presenters by moderating your participation and letting other folks ask some questions or take some of the time. Then going again to our agendas, we wrap up this welcome introductions, agenda review, and some general opening statements. We're going to move into the meat of the presentation. The commission met last week on Thursday and Friday and took some action that is very influential on our programs and our candidates and our faculty. So we'll go through those actions one by one, and then we'll talk about how we are going to implement that, first of all through the individual development plan or the transition plan that we have talked about but has never been required before in an administrator program. And then finally, we go through this document that has program supports, and all the leadership candidates will need a village. And we're going to outline who the village people are. And then we'll sing YMCA. And then we'll talk about how they're all going to have responsibilities for the candidate. And then finally, wrapping up with questions and answers. This one I love the title of, so many candidate questions. You, I'm sure, are getting a lot of them as well. But candidate questions are pouring into the CTC mailboxes, and we have state answers for them, but not program answers for them. So we ask you to do 3 things to help us out. If you would please share the resources that you get from the commission or any other that pertain to them from your own individual institutions. If you would share those resources with their candidates so that they are not in the dark. And then secondly, let them know how to get in contact with you, with their faculty, with whomever they need to know at your institution. And then finally, let them know that you, the program director, will be their first line of defense. That is where they should direct their questions first. And then if it needs to come to a state level, that you would relay that for them. And if you've joined us late, I would like to again point you to the bottom of our slides. This webinar will be posted on our YouTube channel, and you will have full access to the questions and answers section as well. So back in March on the 19th, when Governor Newsom said, we're going to change things, the CTC was very quick to say, we need to adjust our thinking as well. So they took 3 major avenues that still are true today. So we wanted to reinforce with you that the CTC continues to closely monitor both the status of the coronavirus crisis and the impact that it has on our schools and university closures, and those on the candidates that are enrolled in our Ed Prep programs. Also, we continue to be particularly concerned about the candidates' ability to complete their programs. We want this to be a win-win for everyone as much as we can. And so finally, we look for ways to mitigate this situation. And we realize this will not be the perfect answer for anyone. But we have options. We are doing the best we can. We continue to work on behalf of our programs and our candidates as we move forward. And then finally, for this slide, what we are giving you today is the information that is on topic on Friday, May 1st at 1:07 p.m. And it could change in an hour. It could change next week. So we're giving you up to the date what we can for current information. Our commission met last Thursday and Friday, and they had 2 COVID-19 related items that were put before them, items 3A and 4A. And if you look at the next slide, I'll tell you what each of those were about. 3A talked about the appeals and the waivers that needed to be done to help our candidates fulfill their basic requirements. Most of these have to do with preliminary preparation for teaching assignments, but the variable term waiver has a lot to do with our administrative candidates, both in preliminary and clear. So we're going to talk about 3A, and Brittany's going to handle that, and then we'll move on. Terry Clark is going to be reviewing 4A, which is all about the flexibilities. They had A through K. I think that's 11, if I counted my alphabet correctly. 11 things that we are doing to say these things are going to be flexible for the next 6 months or so. So I'll roll up your sleeves and dig in, and I'll turn this over to Brittany G.
Thank you. So I know this presentation is for admin induction programs, so some of this may not apply to your programs or your candidates, but these options may be useful to others in your district or county for staffing in the fall. So we welcome any questions and to point other analyst staff to the archived webinars. So at the April Commission meeting, the Commission acted on a number of issues that impacted applicants, candidates, and credential holders. So these have to do with authorizing the deferral of the basic skills requirement, identifying the hardships related to the COVID-19 as a good cause to submit an application for an extension, authorizing renewals for those clear credentials, and then authorizing the issuance of the program sponsor variable term waiver for credential candidates. They did also authorize on this waiver for options for institutions to submit a one-time request for reissuance of these waivers when candidates have shown continued progress towards completion of their program. So next slide, please. So the first one that we're going to cover is the basic skills requirement. So this has mainly to do with a lot of the out-of-state applications or the out-of-country prepared type teachers. So the deferral for the basic skills will be from March 19th through September 1st. Now, with those that have attempted all 3 of the subtests for the CBEP, would not be eligible for the deferral, but if they attempted or only attempted, or if they have not attempted or only attempted one or two of the subtests, they may be able to get the deferral during that time period of March 19th through September 1st. The applications would also need to be received during this time period. Now, some of the applications that we receive for those out-of-state or out-of-country prepared teachers may already have the RC code listed on their document. So if that's the case, then they would need to send an email to the commission at credentials@ctc.ca.gov requesting that their CBEST be deferred for an additional year. And they would need to state that it is because of the fact that it was due to the COVID-19 crisis. Then when we would respond back to the educators or the employers that have requested that deferral, so then they can notify their employers that they have been given that additional deferral for the CBEST. So we'll go on to the extensions. So the extensions, we have added COVID-19 as a good cause. So with that, if an application is being submitted for an extension, they would need to include a written explanation that they are requesting COVID-19 as a good cause, in addition to a written statement as to why the renewal requirements have not been completed. We do request that on the application form 41-4 in the line for appeals to write COVID-19. That way we can route the application to the correct sort type for the analysts to process those. So for extensions and renewals of credentials, the extension of time is available for only documents that are preliminary type credentials. Clear credential holders only need to have a fingerprint clearance on file, as they do not have any renewal requirements, and they would need to submit a paper application and fee. This cannot be, when they submit the paper application, then they can get their full 5 years without having a lapse in time. But if they submit an online recommendation, then the employer would have to follow the validation of service requests, as we cannot change the issue date of the online renewals. So if they did not renew their application due to COVID-19, then definitely have them submit a paper application and fee so they do not have a lapse in that renewal period.
Brittany, you might want to turn off your video to give us a bigger band for your audio. You're
okay.
tend to be a little freezing.
Okay. Hopefully this will be better. So the next and last thing, which is probably going to be the biggest one for the admin induction programs, is going to be the program sponsor variable term waiver. So this is a brand new type of document, and the application form for this will become available starting June 1st. So preliminary admin programs can submit the waiver for a program sponsored variable term waiver through a paper application and fee with the required documentation. The applicant will be required to sign the application form, be on board with setting up all the requirements that they have left to do in order to receive that recommendation for the program. Institutions sponsoring induction programs for teachers or admins do not need to apply for this type of waiver at this time. So once that program sponsor variable term waiver is issued, it gives the candidate an additional year from the time of issuance to complete the remaining credential requirements. That will also authorize the individual to provide their admin services associated with their baseline credential. The preliminary prep program may request a single renewal of this type of waiver with the appropriate progress of the candidate. So they'll need to make progress towards those requirements that they have remaining on their credential or on their program to be able to get that full credential. And that would all be listed on their waiver app, waiver doc. So the eligibility criteria for this waiver is that the candidates will need to be in good standing with the program. They need to be making appropriate progress towards the completion of that program to receive that recommendation. And they would need to be on track to complete their program by September 1st. And due to the COVID-19 crisis, they would not be able to have completed either their clinical practice hours, any other student teaching, maybe their coursework, any performance assessments that may be required for them to complete that program. Yeah, so I will go ahead and hand it over to Terry Clark.
Excellent. Brittany, there were a couple questions in the chat you might want to go back and check on and respond to.
Okay.
My part of this has to do with what happened in Agenda Item 4A. And Agenda Item 4A was much more focused on programs. And in this item, we explained that the credential requirements are layers, sometimes layered like an onion. Some requirements are in statute and may not be modified by the Commission. The only way you could modify a statutory requirement is through legislative action, additional statute, or an executive order that's enacted on by the administration, by the governor. Also, credential requirements can be in regulation. Now, a regulation is when the Commission takes action to interpret and clarify a statute. And then through the Office of Administrative Law process, this is put into regulations. Once again, regulations can only be changed by promulgating new regulations or by an act of the legislature or from the administration, an EO from the governor. The Commission does have some flexibility, and the flexibility the Commission has is related to requirements and policies that were put in place by the Commission. They can be modified by formal action of the Commission, and that was the 11 things that the Commission did last week. And the Commission's requirements and policies are usually found in program standards. So we're going to talk about program standards a bit. So next slide. So the program standards define what a program needs to offer and what a candidate needs to know and be able to do at that conclusion of that program. The program standards really have broad latitude for you to design your program. In a preliminary program, the program standards let you figure out what courses, what textbooks, how does fieldwork integrate with coursework, what assessments are you using, other than a TPA, of course, for multiple and single, there has to be a TPA, but there's a lot of latitude for designing the program. What the Commission did is to allow even more latitude. So you can't make modifications that go outside the definitions of the program standards. So you could think of it as kind of alleys on the bowling lane. Well, the Commission has moved some of those alleys a little bit out, so there's some additional modifications. Again, the Commission was not allowed to modify anything that's in Ed Code or Title V regulation, though.
Terry, would you speak to the face-to-face coaching versus online coaching? That's probably the most common question I get from clear
That is
programs.
an amazing question for admin induction. The standards and preconditions talk about the majority, 51% of your work must be face-to-face. Well, in today's world, what we're doing right now is face-to-face. That's a reality. There's nothing that's safe, health-wise, to be more face-to-face than this. So for this time, under the COVID pandemic, synchronous online technological communication where you are seeing each other and talking back and forth is going to be counted as face-to-face. It's the way of our world right now. Does that help, Gay? Okay. So I think we're ready for the next slide, Jane. Good. All right. So some things the Commission was not allowed to modify. Examinations, the CBEST, the CSET, and the RECA. We can't modify the CBEST requirement, but you already heard Brittany talk. The Commission has a part of the Ed Code that allows it to defer the requirement. So the Commission has put in place this one-year deferment for the CBEST requirement. CSED and RECA, they can't change the requirements yet, although the commission did take action to say that for student teachers, they can start their student teaching without needing subject matter. The performance assessments are also in Ed Code and or Title V regulations. They cannot be removed by the commission. And other things such as the number of support hours that a teacher intern has to have, and or the fact that there's an early completion option for teacher interns as well as teacher induction candidates. Those are all things the commission could not change on its own and did not. What we're asking all commission approved programs to do, we expect you're going to make modifications. We want you to make modifications so that it works well with your candidates and the way the world is today. We just need you to document those modifications. We expect you to write up a document. There is no specific form for this. We're asking for it to be no more than about 5 pages at maximum. So develop and maintain a summary of what modifications are you making due to COVID. The modifications need to be aligned with the commission adopted standards and in accordance with any of the flexibilities that the commission has put in place. So one of the flexibilities we just talked about for admin induction is that during the COVID situation, this type of communication is face-to-face. So you could just document during COVID, synchronous technology enhanced communication has been counted as face-to-face. All our candidates are having a minimum of 51% of their support through this model. The document is retained at your institution. We do not want you to submit it to the commission. It may be asked for during future accreditation activities, such as when you submit program review in the fall. If you're in that cohort, we may very well ask for that documentation. When you submit your common standards, when you have your site visit, that documentation needs to be available to your team. So, credential expectations that the commission did modify, and this first one does apply to admin induction. When we first started in March to hear about school buildings closing down, people were saying, are we going to have our candidates come back for 3 or 4 months in 2021? The answer is no. The 1920 year is a year. As the governor and the superintendent of public instruction have all said, the school year is not done. School buildings are closed, but school is still continuing. And we are expecting that teachers, administrators, teacher candidates, administrator candidates are still working with students and with colleagues. So the 1920 year is a full year. You don't need to have a candidate do more work next year. But we do want to make it clear that just because the 1920 year is a full year, that doesn't mean if someone has not been participating, they've not been doing any induction in this year, those people don't get credit for this year. That's not how this works. The people who are participating are getting a full year of credit in the 1920 year. The commission also amended the preconditions because we usually expect you can only enter an induction program if you hold a preliminary credential for that type of program. In the teaching world, you need to hold a preliminary, multiple, single subject, or education specialist. In the admin world, you need to hold a preliminary administrative services credential. We are modifying that for this year to say that people who hold a program sponsor, variable term waiver, may begin induction. In fact, we want them to begin induction because we're going to talk about how induction is going to be able to provide part of the support that those individuals need to finish their requirements. Their preliminary program is going to also provide support. It's going to be a collaborative process. This is where we take a little pause and we have questions and answers. And if someone could help me look at the chat and ask a question if you see a question that's on this topic. Do we want to allow an attendee to raise their hand if they have a question and haven't typed it yet?
And James is the one who's been monitoring the chat for us, so he may have some first, and if we have some time, certainly let's have some hands raised and unmute.
I am looking, and we're getting a lot of really good answers already embedded. So right now, the one answer that has not been given is to a regard with CSET requirements modified for student teachers but not interns. Perhaps an explanation around that.
I can definitely respond to that a little bit. If you remember, I talked about how the commission can only modify things that are under their purview only. The California Education Code, as well as Title V regulations, require that an intern has passed subject matter. The commission continues to work with the administration and the legislature, and we are still working on some additional flexibilities. Something else may come available in May. Some programs have said, well, this is so frustrating, you're not letting us apply for that variable term waiver till June 1st. There's a reason for that. If additional options come along and someone's already been recommended and paid for a variable term waiver, it's not going to be very helpful because they would have to do another application and fee. There's another requirement that says the commission has to charge a fee when it processes an application. That has not been waived for us. There was one question I'm seeing here, James, where can Terry repeat the statement about the preconditions? Right. The preconditions are being flexed for the 2021 year to say that anyone holding a preliminary administrative services credential or anyone holding a program sponsor variable term waiver for administration should be accepted into the administrator induction, clear induction program. That is where they're going to get some of their support to finish their program requirements.
And there was another question, is it correct that expiring preliminary service credentials will be automatically extended for 1 year?
That's a Brittany or Angel question. I believe the answer is no. I don't think anything's happening automatically. Angel or Brittany, could you?
Yes, Terry, you are right. And I had just finished typing up the response to that. So the extension on the service credentials, like the admin, is not automatic. We would need an application and fee with that explanation as to why the requirements were completed. And if it's due to the current COVID-19 crisis, that would also need to be included. But if they still have a remainder of time on their admin, so it wasn't issued for that full 5 years, they would need to submit an application and fee to get the remainder of their time first before they can apply for that extension.
And does the good cause submission for extension apply to clear credential candidates who have already had an extension and are almost completed with induction, but still have been delayed due to recent school closures? How might this apply to a candidate whose application expires in the coming weeks?
So if they still hold the preliminary and they need that additional extension, then they may submit the application fee with their good cause of that they're due to the COVID-19 can be submitted. And right now we are processing applications much quicker than our 50 business days. So as long as we have that application received on or before the expiration date, then they won't have any lapse in time, or the file date box can be completed to make sure that they get their the issuance date for no lapse in time.
Okay, I think there's another topic we should bring up here. Maybe you can help me if I'm accurate in this. The program sponsor variable term waiver versus a certificate of eligibility. Because again, remember, an administrator only needs a program sponsor variable term waiver if they have a job. That starts the 1 year clock going on them finishing their credential requirements. So when someone says, yes, I found a job. So then you might say, how does someone look for a job? You can look for a job by having the educator preparation program write a letter saying this candidate is on target to complete this program. This candidate will be recommended for a variable term waiver if they find a job. The candidate can upload that into their EdJoin account, and prospective employers can see that this is an employable person once they have been allowed, they've been offered a position.
And I was looking at it from the standpoint of, well, they've almost completed induction, but not quite, rather than dates on a calendar. Well, Terry just said the 1920 year is a year. So they really have completed induction if the school year is over. You may have them submit some documentation. You may have an exit interview or something, but please don't ask them to do extra above and beyond if it is because of the COVID-19 crisis. Are there any more for us, James?
I think this is Cheryl. I was just going to jump in. I think, Terry, your last response answers this question as well, which is what stance should programs take when processing applications now given the PS-VTW applications won't be available till 6/1. So I think that might help candidates understand, the time frame for this, that they hopefully will be taken care of as of June 1st. I don't know if you have anything more to add there.
I don't think so.
And there was a question about the fee with regard to the variable term waiver.
There is a $100 fee that is not able to be waived at this point in time. I will say the commission is having conversations about that because we do realize this is a fee that a candidate would usually not have to pay. So we are still having conversations about that. Is there some way we can relieve the candidates of that? More as we know more.
I did see a question that touched on induction and the partnerships that would need to be forged with regard to the requirements, and I believe that's going to come later.
Absolutely.
So I think we'll wait and have that hopefully be answered then.
As well as Pat Maruka's question about requiring an induction program. I think we'll cover that coming up as well.
There's one hand up, or we may want to go ahead and move on to the next section.
Should we take that hand?
Carrie, you've been unmuted. You can now unmute yourself if you'd like to ask your question.
I think I got the answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can say I was most concerned about candidates, folks who apply for a position in a district, and our requirement is that they are not eligible unless they have a preliminary. And so now I see that if they come with the other document, which they won't, the program sponsor veritable term waiver, that won't be available though until June. So those people that are applying for positions in the spring will not be eligible.
So, yesterday we talked with our preliminary programs about this, that many of our programs are following actually what was James' idea, to have a letter that states this candidate is in good standing, on track to complete their program, and will be eligible for a variable term waiver under the new program sponsor variations, so they are eligible for hiring. At the same time, we need to educate the employer, and we're aware of that. Certification has a series of means that they are working with the educators, starting with a webinar next Wednesday to try and get the word out. So James, you want to move on at this point?
Thank you, Gay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to be going into the next sets of information about the unique support that will be needed for preliminary service candidates to earn their preliminary administrative services credential while serving on a PS variable term waiver. And so what we're going to be looking at is what that will look like, the unique way that it will be structured, and how you can work with different layers of partners to make sure that it happens effectively. So we're looking at a partnership effort, and really what's going to happen here is, unlike times that we've seen before, it really is going to involve a great deal of collaboration among the preliminary administrative services credential program, looking for guidance from the commission, candidates understanding their responsibilities, employers looking at their responsibilities to the candidates and to the program, what responsibilities the CLEAR Induction program has for administrative services, and finally, what responsibilities the coach has as it supports candidates to see that program requirements are met and that the candidate is then able to be recommended for the credential for which he or she has qualified for. As Gay mentioned earlier, one of the things that we have talked about in recent times is looking at an induction development plan for these candidates who will be on a variable term waiver. As we all know, in teacher induction, it is a requirement and it is written into the program standards, but administrative standards has not really had this requirement embedded into the program standards, but has looked at it more as good practice. And we're now thinking and supporting the idea that program personnel and candidates would meet to identify the credential requirements that the candidate needs to complete in order to be recommended for the preliminary credential. Candidates could be provided with a copy of the requirements, and it could be used as the basis for the individual development plan or transition document between the preliminary and the CLEAR programs. Once the candidate is employed, they would provide their IDP to the induction program that they have chosen to enroll in and use it collaboratively with their coach to write their individual induction plan. Continuing forward, as we know, the initial individualized induction plan has the unmet preliminary program completion requirements as its focus that could translate into the CAPES and then transition into the capsules for induction use. Induction program processes and procedures such as coaching and meetings would occur throughout the program design as it is written by the program, and the remaining preliminary program requirements would be the focus of the initial professional development until all requirements are met and the candidate is recommended for the preliminary teaching credential. The required induction development plan would be used again to really shepherd the candidate in its path towards being recommended for the preliminary teaching credential, and the IIP would be revised or rewritten to address induction components. As program directors know, the IIP is always a living document, and it always is meant to be one that should be revised and edited as the candidate and the coach work together through the capsules and based on the context that the candidate has as his or her administrative assignment. Then the candidate will continue in administrator induction for the remainder of their time. Again, the expectation being 2 years of participation, and then additional time would not be added solely due to a candidate's variable term waiver status in the fall of 2020. So now, Amy, I'm going to turn it to you to talk about what other types of responsibilities and support we can give candidates who are in their preliminary services credential program.
Thank you, James. So preliminary programs still have some responsibilities that they need to fulfill to support their candidates if they have not finished all the requirements. So options are provided to candidates regarding how to complete those remaining requirements. So candidates in preliminary programs may, for example, not have finished their performance assessment, or they may not have finished some other requirements. And so we need you programs to provide clear options to your candidates. And we understand that candidates have very unique situations, so really this most likely is a candidate by candidate conversation. If a candidate does not have a job as an administrator, the candidate does not need to be recommended for that PS-VTW. So, so that's something to keep in mind as they're coming through the program, finishing the program. If they don't have that job yet, then they do not need the PS-VTW. So it would save them that $100 fee. So be careful as you provide guidance to each individual candidate. We need you as programs to be the one that applies for that waiver on behalf of each candidate that needs one, where this is a good route for them. And you need to do it in collaboration with that candidate, because some of the document is filled out by the credential analyst, but there are other parts of that application process that the individual candidate has to complete and sign. And again, remember, these are for those candidates that have not fulfilled the performance assessment requirement. So they've attempted but not passed, or they have not yet attempted. For candidates that have not completed their clinical practice or field work, or potentially have not completed coursework that they need to complete to fulfill all those requirements of your particular program. And what they really need is they need additional time. So the PS-VTW will allow candidates to seek and obtain employment prior to the issuance of that preliminary credential, while they are in fact working through induction and with some support from you to complete the requirements of the program. So in addition, we would like to ask you to outline the responsibilities for the candidate. What is it you would like the candidate to do, and what you need to do during this time? And then also provide clear guidance to program supervisors, induction directors, and induction coaches to assist everyone to understand the roles. So this is going to take some organization and some conversations to really think through what is the best level of support for the candidate between the induction program, the preliminary program, and then the commission itself is going to offer some support as well. So this plan for candidates, we need you to develop and share that plan for the support to the new administrators who are completing their requirements. There are a number of ways this could be done, so we've provided some options for you to consider. You might be able to identify a faculty or supervisor who would be willing to hold an in-person or virtual office hour, perhaps twice a month, or as needed, for candidates who have questions about the performance assessment, if that's what they need to finish, and that are really best answered by you at the program level. So remember, early on in this presentation, we talked a little bit about the number of questions that are coming into us, and really so many of the questions we get are actually very specific to programs. So we would ask you to invite your candidates to come to you first, and of course, we're here for backup. Another option is to identify a faculty or supervisor who would respond to questions from candidates who do have that PS-VTW, are out there, who are working in a job and have entered induction, and they may have questions about what progress they need to make to be able to complete their preliminary program. So we would want you to be able to have a way for candidates to be in touch with you to get those kinds of questions answered, perhaps with your credential analysts or faculty who provide that guidance now. And then finally, another thought is perhaps you could set up technology-based professional learning communities for candidates so that they could interact with you either synchronously or asynchronously, so that they would have a way to share questions with each other and provide some of that peer support to each other that can be really helpful during challenging times.
Amy?
Yes?
If I may refer to one of the questions, because it pertains to what you're discussing, and since you're presenting right now, I think it would be timely. A question has come up: if a candidate is non-consequential and does not have a job, do they have until December 31st to complete the requirements? And I assume we're speaking of the Cal APA. I assume it's simply a matter of them finishing later. For example, if they were due to finish in June and don't have a job in September, but they may need to wait until schools are open to finish their field work.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. So non-consequential candidates, candidates who had that opportunity to engage with the Cal APA, but in a non-consequential way, meaning that they did not have to meet a passing standard. They needed to complete the 3 assessments and submit them. Those candidates still have their original due date, which we set at December 31st of 2020, giving them that extra time and support to get that work done. So yes, now we've had this spring that was very unexpected for all of us, but they do need to go ahead and finish and complete those assessment cycles and submit them. Now, if a candidate is really in a tough spot and has some very COVID-19 related issues that they're dealing with and are challenged by, and really cannot finish completion by December 31st of 2020, you may individually come to us and ask on behalf of that candidate for an extension of time, and we will think that through with you. And of course, we're always here to support candidates. And we know some candidates are really much more affected by COVID-19 than others. But these non-consequential candidates really do need to finish up so that they can get those cycles submitted. So thanks, James, for that question. Should I go on? Did we cover slide 30? I'm sorry, I was thinking about the question. We did? All right, slide 31. So a little bit more on the responsibilities for you programs. We'd like you to maintain communication with leadership in districts where your VTW candidates are employed, your program-sponsored VTW candidates. And what we mean by that is that we would like you as programs, we think that you already do this, but we just want to kind of remind you, you need to know where your candidates are going for employment, where they're going to work and enter induction. And by staying in touch with them and maintaining that communication, and there's so many ways to do that, that way, as you know where they're going and as you know where they're employed and where they're doing induction, you can then help coordinate that support. So really, it really is going to take, as others have already said in this webinar, a very collaborative effort between the preliminary program, the induction program, and the commission to support candidates as they move into employment and need to finish up preliminary requirements. All right, here are a few things that we at the commission are going to be offering to support these candidates directly and support you and the induction program. So together, we will help all our candidates get through this challenging time. So we at the commission will provide, archive, and post webinars on the commission's YouTube channel and perhaps in other website spots. We're kind of thinking through what's most logical and quick for you to find. But we will post webinars. And these webinars will share information about the assessments. So we will tell you about where to find these on the PSDE news, and of course at our www.ctcexams.nussync.com website. That's the Evaluation Systems Commission website. If you go there or you come to the Commission's website, you will find information about how and when we will do this. Our webinars will cover the tasks and the rubrics and help the induction community understand what the tasks are expecting around performance and what the rubrics describe for performance. And also they will provide support around the roles of that collaborative relationship between preliminary and induction programs and what preliminary induction programs need to avoid as they support candidates. So those of you who have already worked with us or have had some involvement know that we have very clear policy supports about how to support a candidate in an embedded supported performance assessment. And we will be spending a lot of time there about how we help that candidate through using clarifying questions and pointing them towards resources, reading their responses, watching their videos, etc. So we'll be providing support to induction around that. In addition to those webinars, we will offer a weekly office hour outside of the school day for PASC candidates, employers, and program and faculty staff so that they can engage with commission staff and learn more and ask about the Cal APA. We already do this now on Thursdays for preliminary programs, so we will offer, in addition to that hour, another hour, particularly for candidates and induction programs. Next slide. We also have a lot of email boxes that you can send candidates, faculty, employers, and program directors to submit questions. You know, we are always available and will be on a weekly basis as we continue forward, and we're here to support you. So please do reach out with your questions. And finally, we will work with our technical contractor evaluation systems to continue to offer a full range of candidate supports around issues related to registration, how to submit their work, video supports, and other systems issues. And again, though a lot of these supports are already available, and they're available at that evaluation systems website. So lots of supports coming to you from the commission to help out during this challenging time.
Right. And then, of course, there's a role for candidates in all of this. And I think it's really important, I think, more than anything, is that these candidates need to know that they are in a unique situation. And everybody is sort of, you know, the term of the day is collaborate. So really working hard and together to get them through to earn their credential and to finish them through. Remember, these are candidates that are just about done. They're almost there. And so, you know, I think as the preliminary programs try to work with these candidates, it's really important for the candidates to understand that they have a responsibility to maintain their affiliation with their PASC program. So as Amy was outlining all of the ways in which institutions can think about how do we support these candidates, it's really important for candidates to understand, who do I talk to? Where do I go? Once I'm out of this institution, where are those connections with my preliminary program, and how will that affiliation be maintained? So they need to be really clear about that process for every specific institution. They need to understand that if they are on a program-sponsored variable term waiver, that they need to enroll in the commission-approved induction program. They are unique, so it's going to be important for them to understand what this document means for them. And of course, they need to be crystal clear about what's left for them to complete their program, the preliminary program, to earn that preliminary credential. So it's really important that the documents that both Amy and James had talked about in terms of the transition plans, in terms of the induction plans, are really, really clear, so that there is no ambiguity about what the candidate still needs to do. The last thing we want to do is have there be some issues with, well, I thought I only had to do this, or I only had to do that. It really needs to be crystal clear. And then, of course, make sure that they understand all of those resources that are available to them, whether they are through the commission, whether through the institution as their preliminary program, their induction program, and the commission. So, and evaluation systems. So, you know, if the performance assessment is the very last thing, and we're assuming that for most candidates, that is the last thing that they need to do. Obviously, every candidate is going to be unique, as Amy mentioned. So we will really need to understand on a person-by-person level what they need to do to complete their program. Okay, you can go to the next slide. And then, of course, the employers have responsibilities. They need to ensure that if a person is coming to the induction program with either a program-sponsored variable term waiver, that those candidates are allowed to enroll in those induction programs that you all offer. Whether they, so they can either have the preliminary or can have the PS-VTW. So that needs to be clearly understood by the employers. And as I think Gay mentioned, you know, there's going to be a number of technical assistance provided. We were talking about letters that need to go out to the HR personnel to understand what this document actually means. So there will be, over the coming weeks and months, some communication from the commission to try to get the word out as to what this new document really is and what it stands for and what people can do on that. And then, you know, to really identify a program staff member to maintain the records for each one of these individuals, it's going to be really important. And to maintain that partnership with the preliminary program. So making sure that each candidate gets the kind of support they need to get them through, to provide them timely and accurate information. Again, they're in a unique situation. We hope this is only going to be for this period of time. You know, crossing our fingers that a vaccine will be available soon. You know, so really making sure that collaboration is really strong in the communication department, and making sure that everybody knows what, you know, candidate X, Y, or Z needs to complete. So that's really important. Next slide. And I think that one is Gay's.
It is mine. This brings us to our next stakeholder group in our village, and that would be you, the Clear Induction ASC program. And you have responsibilities for this unique set of candidates as well. So number one would be follow the commission guidance. And we said that isn't a static item at this point in time. It is still evolving and changing. So the information we are providing today is current for today. And don't stop there. So keep abreast of our website. We have things that are coming, evolving per day. I will try and keep you apprised as well through our group email chats and things like that. But we will provide guidance for a bunch of things, whether it be the performance assessment, the field work that has yet to be finished, or if they have any other requirement, that we will provide you guidance on how best to deal with that. And then secondly, we ask that your coaches that will be assigned to these candidates will be trained in the performance assessment structures, processes, and procedures, so that they are well adapted to take the individual development plan or the transition plan and move it into the initial IIP. And they can really help the candidate to complete those outstanding requirements so that they can move 100% into induction. And next, we need the programs to understand that the work that is being done to complete their program is still going to be work that is given credit in the induction program. We continue to think of an induction program as a 2-year participatory program. So if the first initial IIP is about them finishing up their preliminary credential, that's fine. They will do that. And once it's passed, they will move on to an additional IIP or revise the one that's there and fully enter into the induction program. We were asked yesterday, what happens if it takes someone 2 years to finish up their requirements for the preliminary program? Well, then they would be granted their clear credential and they would move on, because it is 2 years for an induction program. Next, your coaches are going to be asked to still do that 1-2 punch that they have been providing all along. So not only the long-term goals of the preliminary program requirements that are still remaining, but also giving them timely job-embedded just-in-time is what Teacher Induction Program calls it. The support for their day-to-day work on campus or whatever programs they are running. This is all new to them. They are acting administrators. They are going to need coaching in how I do the job I'm doing, while at the same time I am preparing to finish up my preliminary credential. And then secondly, provide clear expectations to the coaches regarding their new role in supporting the candidate. They're going to be doing a multitude of tasks, and they need to be very comfortable in what they are providing the candidate. Amy outlined many things that the commission will be doing. Preliminary program relationships are going to be key, as well as an ongoing and often touched relationship with the candidate themselves. And then finally, maintain an expectation of a 2-year induction program. It is not that these preliminary program requirements are going to be out of the way and then we're going to have the 2 years of induction. This is not an add-on. This whole participation piece is part of the 2 years of expected induction. And then the very important last one is to maintain the partnerships with the PS-VTW employees preparation program, their PASC program. We need to ensure that these candidates are successful. We want it to be a win-win. A win for the employer so they can continue to employ them, a win for the induction program to earn their clear credential, a win for the preliminary program to get the preliminary credential, and that the candidate becomes a lifelong education leader in our state system.
Now I believe I get to talk a little bit about the coach's responsibilities, because remember, it takes everyone. We've tried to think about this from all angles. There is a document that we posted, I hope later today, that has everything in one document for the administrator preparation continuum. It would address preliminary programs, it addresses induction programs, it has information for employers, for the induction program, the candidate. So if a coach has someone who is on a PS-VTW next year, the coach really needs to participate in some training or webinars regarding the Cal APA. And as Amy has shared, her staff is going to work up some things specifically for coaches so that they understand what they should do, what they must do, what they can't do. The coach's job is just to support their new administrator in completing the performance assessment requirement, which is what's going to be the normal requirement that is still there. It's possible it's field work, it's possible some other PASC program requirement, but we believe the vast majority of people on a PS-VTW are going to need to finish their performance assessment. The coach also, though, should be providing that timely, job-embedded, just-in-time support, helping the candidate improve their long-term practice as a school administrator. This is not different from what someone would be doing in induction if they had passed their APA. It's all the same knowledge and skills. The capes, the capsules, they are so connected. The next slide. So the coach should actually work with their candidate in the development of their initial IIP, which will identify and include the remaining portion of the preliminary requirements. Once that performance assessment has been completed and passed, then subsequent IIPs and coaching continue. They follow where the individual has needs. Just like this is such an individualized program, we really want to take every new administrator where they are, consider the assignment they're in, and help them grow to be the best professional that they can be. It is possible the coach may need to reach back to the preliminary program for guidance, so the coach should know which preliminary program their partner administrator came from. If the preliminary program information is not sufficient or not clear enough for the coach, as Amy shared, there's going to be commission resources, office hours, the ability to send in questions, to access webinars 24/7. These will be available at all times on the commission webpage. We'll have them posted on the YouTube page, and we'll have an organized structure so that an induction coach could see, oh, I should look at this, this, and this. Here are the documents I should see. Hopefully that's helpful for you as you think about your coach's roles.
James, did you see any questions that we have missed as we went by? I did ask James to correct. Oh, good, he did correct mine. As soon as I typed that in there, I thought that isn't the correct website. So look at James' note to all about where the YouTube channel address is.
So there's one question that was posed, and I thought it might have been answered, but I just want to make sure that it is clear for Carolyn. And given that in the program standards, the coach and the program leadership and the candidate collectively work together in terms of assessments that are both formative and summative, the question really relies on, does the CLEAR program coach evaluate the preliminary requirements as either met or not met? Gabe?
I'll take that one. I had to unmute myself, sorry.
That's okay.
The preliminary program is responsible for the candidate earning the preliminary credential. So all information will go back to them if it's a program question outside of the passage of the Cal APA. The Cal APA has its own assessment structure, and they get back scores from our technical partner, Evaluation Systems, and that will have a passing score of 14 points for cycle 1, and 12 and 12 for cycles 2 and 3. And if they meet those thresholds, they already know they will pass. But no, the coach will not be evaluating them in whether they meet preliminary requirements. The preliminary program is responsible for that.
And I believe this would be a follow-up question that still holds with the one that was just posed. And it looks like there are some folks who are asking about collaboration working across the two separate programs, you know, with the preliminary and the clear. Is expectation only for good communication, and how might it affect the recommendation for the preliminary?
I'll take that one at least a start, and everyone else can join in. Remember, you're talking about a set of candidates who were on track, in good standing with their programs, and were scheduled to finish before September 1st of 2020. Most of the candidates would be on track to finish at the end of the spring semester, which is very close to the end of May for most of our colleges and universities. So they were like 6 weeks out of finishing up. So they have received most of the information. They have received all of the preparation information. What they really need now from the Clear Induction program, the coaches, is a critical friend. But we want them to succeed. We want them to be able to pass those performance assessments. So that's going to require a give and a take relationship, and it's up to the programs how they want to do this. They may want to do it through a very informal handshake. They may wish to write out an MOU where every person, every partner, responsibilities is prescribed. It really is a local decision, but it really will take all of us to make sure that our candidates succeed. Would any of you like to add to that?
I was going to add a little something, is that the preliminary program is still making the recommendation for the preliminary credential. There is going to be a document that hopefully is posted later today that actually gives you a link to the support document that the Cal APA has posted, which really gives you some great resources and suggestions for how a coach should really collaborate with their administrator as they're thinking about and doing their Cal APA. But it is the preliminary program, and I kind of think that this pandemic has been horrible, but I think one of the things it's shown us is we can get a lot done in a collaborative technological environment. So I think this is a way that preliminary programs and induction programs can connect with each other.
And I think I would add too, if we look at what are the objectives of the 3 cycles of the Cal APA, they will be areas of work between the coach and the candidate in looking at a problem of practice, in facilitating collaborative groups, and in coaching teachers and or other educators as they are going through their initial job as an administrator. So really the tasks that are there, they're already doing. So it really is not seen as extra work. In looking at some other questions, one just came in: can an intern who will be on an extension switch job at this time, their 3rd year, under this extended internship credential? And looks like, Terry, you're about to answer that. Sorry, I jumped ahead.
Oh, that's all right. I'm just asking, is this an administrative intern or a teaching intern? And because it's the teaching intern question is, if the intern is going to a new position in a different district, rather than getting an extension, it will probably be that person would get a program sponsored variable term waiver, because that is not staying in the same district. Remember, an intern document is limited to a specific district.
And it looks like the clarification was provided either teaching or administrator.
So in both cases, the intern document is limited to that initial employing district. So at minimum, if there was an extension, it would have to be to the new district or the PS variable term waiver. If all that's remaining is completing the performance assessment, is also a possibility.
Okay, we are up to date with our question. And yes, there is going to be a way that participants will be able to see the questions. We are recording the meeting chat through a transcript that will be posted and will be accessible so that you can all see what questions were asked. So with that, I'm going to have us continue.
Could I ask Gay to answer the question that says, I understand that induction should focus on supporting candidates completing the PASC, and this is focused on coaching. Does this mean we hold off on other components of the induction program, the monthly seminars that we hold in our program, or is it up to us to adapt those?
And I would reply that it is up to you to adapt and using best practices. If the seminars are pertinent to what that individual candidate needs, by all means, let them attend the seminars. If it's something that would be added on to what they're already doing for their initial IIP that is really focused on the 3 cycles that James just outlined, then perhaps it would be postponed. So it might be a different answer that it is for me than it was for James, depending on what our requirements are, what our inquiries are based upon for the induction program.
So moving forward, Cheryl, I believe you're going to share some COVID-19 resources.
Yeah, so most of you by now have seen that we have a dedicated COVID-19 webpage, which we are posting any FAQs, any guidance documents, any information about the commission actions. It's really where we'll be home for the next few months about anything that changes, any updates. We try to take the information that comes into the commission and relate that to a larger context. So if you're asking a question about a candidate, we try to answer it in a broader way for everybody else who might have that same situation. And we try to keep those FAQs up to date. Now, things have changed because the situation is very fluid and we were trying to answer it as we go along. So we will try to keep them up to date as much as we possibly can as things change and develop over the course of the next few months. We do have the commission action on that same page with guidance. We're working on guidance. We have a few documents up there, but we are working on more. As Terry said, there's going to be a couple of additional items up probably this afternoon and by Monday. So just keep checking that COVID page on the Commission's website as often as you can. And then, of course, the PSD news each Friday, which we know has gotten very lengthy, but there's a lot of good information in there. And as we are having to put out either coded correspondences or program sponsor alerts or any other information from the Commission, we are happy to try to keep everybody abreast as things happen. And then if there's anything additional from the state agencies that are involved in kind of following this, we will make sure that our website is up to date. It is the place that we try to, get the word out as much as possible. And we are doing everything we can to get webinars up, to provide any sort of technical assistance as much as we can. And we are all learning from you. So as you have some unique situations or things that we haven't thought about yet, please let us know. We're happy to problem solve with you. Next slide. And then, of course, there's lots of other, beginning to be lots of other COVID resources available. The Learning Policy Institute, of course, is becoming very prolific in this area. So there are some documents here that you might be interested in. We are more and more seeing a lot of documents that are out there, resources for educators and for administrators in terms of just, here's what the research says, here's ways to do different strategies with respect to distance learning. We're seeing a lot of that in the PPS field in terms of social emotional learning and mental health and those kinds of things. So, we're not able to capture all of that, but I think together as a community, we can make sure that we are doing the best we can to provide services to these candidates that are in this position now and kind of moving forward as we go through the next year together. And next slide. And of course, we have the contact information here. PSD info, which is sort of our broad category of I don't know where this question lands, so I'm going to send it here. And then the accreditation webpage, if you are specifically asking about a program change or a program modification, or what do you have to do for, the accreditation cycle. And then, of course, we have our stellar consultant in this area, Gay Roby, G. Roby at ctc.ca.gov, who, of course, is a wonderful resource. All things administrative services. So please feel free to reach out. We will get back to you as soon as we possibly can. We have somebody monitoring these emails all the time. We do get a heavy load right now. Lots of candidate questions, lots of program questions. So for the most part, just so you know, with candidate questions, we try first and foremost to send them back to your institutions, because a lot of times they are questions that really the program should answer. But if we have to, we will try to deal with their specific situations. But most of the time, we send it back to the institution and say, you need to work on this with your program. So that's it here. And we're happy. I think we were going to open it up to some questions if we can. Is that the case?
I believe so. And it looks like we did get a question with regard to, it's a specific question, but basically can the CTC provide a grace period starting today, now that they've received some guidance and information on May 1st, to help if there is a candidate who has a extension on a credential expiring today? I'm wondering
James,
if that, yes.
James, this is an issue that needs to be sent to credentials at ctc.ca.gov immediately, because it's about a specific candidate, and they're going to be the ones to give you the best information. And if Angel or Brittany are still online, there's something coming up about this specific institution.
Yeah, I'm still here, and on this particular one that you're looking at for the specific candidate, if you want, still send the information to credentials at CTC, include the educator's full name and date of birth so we can look up their file. And that way we can provide you with the best, most accurate answer in regards to this particular situation.
Thank you, Brittany. If anyone has another question, if you would go ahead and raise your hand. It looks like Amy has something. Amy. I was meaning attendees, but attendees can start raising their hand too now.
Yeah. I just wanted to add, I hadn't really thought about this yesterday when we were talking on that webinar, but as I was working on getting our PSDE news ready for publication today, we have posted for many, many weeks now what are called deep dives into our cycles, and they are there right now. So if you are eager to get started and learn more about the Cal APA, there are already posted for you in the PSDE news overviews of each of the 3 cycles and the rubrics that go along with them. So I invite you to visit those slide deck presentation webinars, and if you've got that energy level and need something to do, you can get started right now. And of course, we'll offer more as we go. But I'm just putting this in the chat as well. Thanks. That's what I wanted to point out.
This is your time. We have 13 more minutes that we're here ready to answer or try to answer your questions if you have any.
Terry, do we want participants to still post questions in the chat, or may they raise their hand and ask?
I think raising their hand now is fine. We have a lot of questions in the chat. We'll make sure to get those posted with answers.
Just a comment, since this is Friday and it takes us a while to transcribe and organize those questions and answers, be probably looking for this to be posted sometime midweek next week.
This is Carolyn. I think I'm being invited to speak. I'm wondering about, I know that I read or I heard from one of you in a previous webinar that there would be training videos to support lead coaches in this time. Is that also part of the YouTube channel that you referenced earlier?
Yes, so yes, absolutely. That is what we are offering to do, is to provide webinars as we move into the spring and summer and fall that are particularly focused on coaches that are just beginning to need to become familiar with the performance assessment requirements and suggestions for how to coach and provide those appropriate support. So if that's what you were wondering about, yes, absolutely. We will be providing those webinars and archiving them and helping you think through how to help support your induction folks to learn about this so they can support candidates.
Amy, something I was just thinking about that might be really helpful is we may want to find a place to post on the APA webpage or on maybe a new admin induction webpage, a table where we identify these are things that are pertinent for coaches and really clearly identify. So a coach doesn't have to go trying to figure out what might I look at. We just really put it this and this and this. Here are the best things for you all in one place.
Yep.
Speaking of which, James, have we talked about our latest Google Web Classroom that we just did a webinar on? Have we referenced that yet?
No, I don't believe we have, but are you speaking of the one about utilizing the Google Suite for Education for instruction?
No, the next week where we had the actual coaching session.
Yes.
I got you mixed up.
No, that's okay. It is currently on the playlist for the Cal APA candidate and program supports. We have a online webinar in which a superintendent and a principal enter into a coaching conversation in order to showcase how it can look in a virtual environment. They utilize resources through Google and also utilizing Zoom. And there is an actual 30-minute conversation between these two administrators on how they can be supportive, ask questions, and really showcase that face-to-face coaching dyad that Terry referenced earlier that does indeed satisfy those 40 hours of requirement. So it might be one that you would want to take a look at in the Cal APA playlist on our YouTube channel at the Commission.
There's a question in the chat that I think it's a timing one, which I don't know if somebody was going to answer it, and it just disappeared from me. So somebody was asking whether they should wait until a student gets a VTW before accepting their application to the induction program, or can they accept the application with the understanding that the candidate will get a VTW? And I don't know what the timing is between when we know that they're eligible for a VTW and when they will actually get it, but I don't know if maybe Terry or maybe even Brittany talks.
I actually just responded something. I think as soon as the administrator knows they have a position as a school administrator, they need to find their induction program. That maybe the VTW application is going in at the same time. But as soon as they know they have a job as a school administrator, they need to find an induction program. And if they have a job, you should be accepting them, with the caveat that within the next 2 to 3 weeks, you would need, of course, to see evidence of the PS-VTW.
And Terry, if I could add to that, also what's important is that the candidate does have an understanding from his or her employing district or county office or whatever school he or she has secured employment as to when their starting date is, so that it helps to understand where they fall in terms of their contract beginning, and again to help guide that support and then also the enrollment through the induction process.
Makes a lot of sense, James.
And can I just add, I think we covered this, but just in case we didn't, the VTW, the PS-VTW can be extended for another year if the candidate needs additional time given their circumstance. And I'm sure as we move along, depending on how things get cleared up or don't get cleared up in relation to COVID-19, the Commission, of course, might extend that even further. So just know the Commission is here to support you and candidates. And while some things have time limits, we, of course, as the weeks and months go by, will reconsider those time limits and potentially make new decisions.
We have 6 more minutes. You don't want that opportunity to pass you by. Oh my goodness, a long one. There you go, James.
Yes. Pat, how about if you raise your hand and ask this question? I think that might be the best way, and Terry will unmute you. I believe one of them just came through.
Given Pat the ability to unmute herself.
Woohoo! Hi, everybody. Okay, I'll just read this really quick. I understand about the candidates not being required to complete an additional 3 to 4 months of induction next year to satisfy this year. But it's still unclear to me how much latitude programs have in setting reduced expectations for the candidates. Our school left school sites on March 13th. If candidates were on track for completion and participating fully as of that date, are they still required to finish their current inquiry for teacher induction or their design learning plans admin induction that was set for this year? Of course, the coach-candidate collaboration will continue until the end of the year. Is the rest of it up to us as a program to determine?
I think the rest of it is up to what's appropriate for that candidate. For some candidates, the inquiry they were working on still makes sense and finishing it is perfect. For other candidates, because of how they are now interacting with their students or with their teachers, if it's an administrator, what they were doing is not appropriate. So do what's best for your candidate to support them in their growth as an educator. Yay, anything else?
Oh, I think that's
Okay.
great.
Okay, thank you.
Terry, there is a question by Viet next about, what if the candidate runs out their 2 VTW years and they still haven't completed their preliminary requirements?
We're going to have to see what happens as this rolls out. Remember, when they finish their VTW requirements, they're getting a preliminary credential. If they've done 2 full years of induction and they're ready to go to the clear, we're still going to have to talk to certification. I don't know that they can go directly to a clear. I imagine they're still going to need to get recommended for their preliminary and then get recommended for the clear.
Yes, Terry, you're correct. We cannot go straight to the clear if they haven't had the preliminary. So they'd have to be recommended for the preliminary first, and then they can turn around once that's issued and be upgraded to the clear.
Yeah.
Unless things change between now and then. But as of right now, that's what would have to happen.
Right.
And I think just to make sure we're clear, Terry and Gay, just a reminder that the PS-VTW is really intended for those candidates who are very close to completing. But if they're just starting their program, a PS-VTW would not be appropriate. That's correct?
That is completely correct. The PS-VTW is for someone who's completed all their coursework. They've completed either all of their field experiences or almost all. They may even have completed part of their performance assessment. If they're using the Cal APA or Cal TPA, they've probably done either 1 cycle as a teacher and 1 or 2 cycles as an administrator. This is only, they are so close to being done. They are 95% done. They just need that last little bit, and they couldn't get the video done because everybody got out of school so fast.
We do have a question that just came in. It says, just to be clear, candidates in a clear administrative services credential program do not need to finish their hours before being recommended for their clear admin credential because this counted as a full year. And Gay, it was directed to you.
I know, but Terry had a different aspect on this than I did earlier, so I'm going to let Terry talk to that.
Well, an administrator has to have 2 years of experience, right, to be eligible for their clear. This is a year. These people are not on vacation now. They are still working, and they are working with the teachers. They're still working as part of this year. So this is part of their year. We can't recommend them on May 1st, but at the end of the semester, at the end of the school year, June 5th, June 10th, then they're ready to be recommended for the clear credential, yes.
And the earlier question was, is 40 years of coaching required? 40 hours of coaching required? And you said, yeah, that's in the program standard, where I had thought perhaps that was one of the modification ones. If they are unable to meet with their coach and a year is a year, that might be a program waiver or adjustment that would be documented and they would have to show. So I went one way and you went the other.
I was kind of figuring that I think we're meeting more now, and I imagine that most new administrators are actually, maybe it's not their identified coach, but if we look at this as a system of support, I bet they're working with experienced administrators, and they've done 2 or 3 times as much of this since March 13th as usual. So I'm not at all worried about them getting their 40 hours in.
Right. I think part of the argument put forth before the commission was that, schools aren't closed and people are doing things. It may not be exactly what was in the plan for that person, but they are doing an awful lot. And this experience from March to June, or whenever the school officially gets out, is valuable and it's critical. And they've been working with experienced teachers and with experienced administrators and all of that to make the schools continue to run and operate. So it's giving credit. It's just giving credit in a different way and for different things.
Carolyn, I unmuted you.
I think Cheryl just rephrased the thing that I was going to rephrase. So let me just take one more go at it. So even though the coach assigned by the program may not have met the 40-hour requirement with the candidate, we are recognizing that these candidates are receiving supports from within their system. And as the program director, I can, on a case-by-case basis, look at those situations and make the appropriate recommendation for that candidate.
Summarized very well, Carolyn. Yes.
Thank you.
And with that great summary, I believe it answers the question with regard to the 40-hour requirement that Danielle posed. Danielle, if you could let us know if we did not answer the question, but it was again about clarification with regard to the 40-hour requirement.
And James, I think we might want to return to make sure Viet is understanding. Hopefully I'm saying your name correctly. I apologize if I'm not, but I'm not sure that she's totally, I mean, perhaps we need to just follow up there. You have to complete your preliminary credential.
Oh, I maybe, Viet, are you actually talking about the 2 years of serving as an administrator while you're holding a preliminary credential?
Yes.
Brittany, what do we have? We may need to think about this and put this in writing in our answers, because you're right. They're supposed to serve for a number of time while they're holding a preliminary.
Yes, I mean, it has happened. I've seen it very rarely where somebody wasn't recommended for the preliminary, but they went ahead and completed the clear. So in order for us to be able to do that in our system, for the upgrade to happen, they have to be recommended for the preliminary first and then upgrade to the clear. So, I mean, in this kind of situation, it might be possible that someone is doing their 2 years of employment while not holding the clear, or not holding the preliminary, excuse me. So this is kind of a slightly unique situation.
But regardless, right, again, just to emphasize, they have to apply, pay for, and hold the preliminary, even if it's for 2 days of time before they then are awarded the clear. It has to happen in that order.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, preliminary first, then they can upgrade to the clear.
And Terry, thank you for providing that information to Danielle about the flexibility.
Yeah, I said I'm much more comfortable in being flexible about the type of coaching, the format of coaching, who is doing the coaching. I'm not really comfortable saying that fewer than 40 hours of coaching. I kind of think that the induction standards are expecting a little over an hour a week. And as I said, I think most administrators, new ones, are running now, and they're working with as many experienced educators and experienced administrators as they can. So I'm not seeing it that it's as hard to get the 40 hours. You may have to help your candidates understand that they need to document more broadly their hours.
Correct. And I think if we could go back to what I had referenced earlier with the coaching conversation between the superintendent and the principal was new to the district. And so they really outlined how they were doing their hours. So that might be another reference point to take a look at that particular webinar and see the ways that they had come together to still ensure that they were meeting together and receiving that coaching support. Thank you, Danielle. She said that was a great webinar. Thank you.
And we have reached past the 2:30 hour. We thank each and every one of you for staying. We're at half of our capacity, what we had at the beginning, but we thank you for hanging in there with us. Please stay in contact with us and send questions as appropriate. Thank you all for attending.